Welcome to What I Did Next from A&T Media. I'm Malak Fuad, your host. What I Did Next revolves around people's personal and professional crossroads and looks at those trajectories from key pivot points. My guests are multilingual, multicultural, with roots in the Middle East. They're engaged, curious, and passionate about knowledge and strive to make a difference in the world. Today, I'm delighted to welcome Prince Abbas Hilmi onto the last episode of Season 2. Prince Abbas Hilmi is a descendant of two Middle Eastern royal houses. Through his father, Prince Mohammed Abdul Monaim, he is a descendant of Muhammad Ali of Egypt, while his mother, Nazli Shah Sultan, was the granddaughter of Mehmed VI, the last Ottoman Sultan. A quiet and modest man, Prince Abbas Hilmi spoke to me about his unique life journey, weaving stories of royalty and history with the more contemporary realities of the region's finance and business industries. The show's focus on people's crossroads is visible in the life and times of the prince, starting with an early pivot when he was exiled from Egypt. I also spoke to him about his career and his passion and dedication to the preservation of key Egyptian heritage sites such as the Menil Palace and other important landmarks in the capital. One thing that struck me was how he feels equally comfortable in both Turkey and Egypt, and how he carries the responsibilities of his position lightly, elegantly, and with delicacy and humility. We begin with seeing who would be included at his fantasy dinner party.
Well, my ideal dinner party is with my family. That really is the case, and I would love to, especially now that I'm at the moment alone in Cairo. I'd love to have my wife and children and grandchildren nowadays with me. So that would be my ideal time. Yes.
Would you have any relatives who are no longer with us?
No, of course. It sounds crazy, but obviously I would be fascinated to even meet and talk, if you can imagine that, with the great Muhammad Ali. Because he was an incredible visionary, and what happened afterwards was not necessarily what he wanted. So I would be fascinated to hear his take on it.
I think if you had him at a dinner, you wouldn't need anyone else, would you?
I don't need to eat anything. I'd be happy to just listen to him.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And how would you think he'd look at the world we're in today?
I think it's so different. He was very much part of the Ottoman Empire, and he's usually in Egypt. He's depicted as an enemy of the Ottomans, and he wasn't. He was a reformer, and I think it's very unfortunate that they didn't listen to him. They fought him. It's not the other way around.
You mean the Ottomans fought him?
The Ottomans fought.
That's
they
right.
saw him as a rival and as a dangerous person. Muhammad Ali is generally misunderstood, to my point of view. I'm not a historian, but I obviously have strong views about it.
It's very interesting because the Ottoman Empire at the time was a very decentralized way of managing.
Yes.
And yet Muhammad Ali, when he came to Egypt, went the opposite way, didn't he? He began to realize that he needed to, in order to make the country efficient,
yes,
he had to be much more centralized in his approach.
Well, yes and no. I think the Muhammad Ali needed to put law and order in the country. There was complete chaos in Egypt after the Napoleonic invasion. The French disrupted Egypt. The French are always saying how wonderful they were, but it's not the full story, because they disrupted the whole system. And then when they were defeated and had to leave, there was chaos. It was real chaos.
Let's move on, if you don't mind, to the next question, which was looking at a favorite book, a favorite piece of music.
A favorite book, I think I must choose the Quran Kareem, which is our guide in life. I remember my last conversation with Prince Yusuf Kamal, Prince Yusuf Kamal is a great figure in the royal family. He was in exile by then. This is 1956, something like that. And he was living in Austria, and he invited me to tea, and it's just the two of us having tea at the Lausanne Palace. And so he said, "What are you doing now?" So I said, I'm studying in England." "Oh, yes. He said, so how is your English?" I said, "Well, I had a lot of trouble, actually, to start with English. But I said, I'm better off. I'm better now. So I'm getting better at English." I said, "Oh, good. All business is in English. And all contracts have to be written in English," he said. It's the most precise language." And so I said, yes, I know about that. And then he said, "What are the languages?" I said, "French. I went to French schools, and so my first studied language is French." Yes. Very, very good playwrights they have." So I said, "But not very serious people." And he said, "What about your Arabic?" So I said, it's deteriorating, because I'm in England and I don't have a lot of opportunity." So I said, "Well, what should I do?" And he said, the Quran Kareem, it's in 30 parts, and you read one part every day.
That's wonderful advice.
And he says,
and it's the true
you
essence.
learn your religion, you learn the language, and he says it'll inspire you. He says, just do that. Of course, I'm afraid I don't do that, but
it's sound advice.
It's his advice. So it reminded me. I said, what do you do? Well, you read the Quran Kareem. And then he said, "What about your Turkish?" So I said, "I took O-level Turkish at school, and it's not too bad." No, these are origins. You mustn't forget that." And said, "Okay, all right." And he said, "How about your German?" And I said, "Well, my German is non-existent.
Yes.
I'd like to learn German." He said, "What? You don't know German? They're the only serious people in Europe." He says they're hardworking, intelligent. He says, and you go and you don't even know their language? What about your Persian? And I said, "Persian, yes, I also would like to know, but I don't know Persian."
There's only so many hours in the day.
You don't know Persian? He says, "Your parents haven't educated you."
Isn't that funny?
I promise you,
Absolutely.
he said that. Then he said, the greatest poets that have ever existed were all Persians. And he says, Saadi, Firdousi, Hafez. You don't know any of it? I said, "No, I'm afraid I don't." And he started, you imagine, he was about 90 by then.
He was reciting it.
He was reciting Persian poetry.
That's fun.
And even the old ladies at the palace were all looking around to see
That's
what
quite
was
something.
going on. And he was, "No, it's on, and he's very musical.
Yes.
So it was very impressive.
That's quite a story.
And he went on reciting Persian poetry, and he says, "What a shame you don't know any of it."
Absolutely. It's so funny how that was considered so important.
They were incredibly well educated. You see, this is 6 languages which he considered to be basic.
The fundamentals.
Fundamental. First of all, you learn these 6 languages.
So he found you wanting in the end.
He found me uneducated, ignorant, and I'm afraid I still am.
That's very funny. And so what about music? You're a classical music fan.
Yes, it's funny that as well, because my mother was very musical, and I spent a lot of time with my mother when I was little, I suppose like most kids, and she always had classical music on, and I always found it rather annoying. And
As
I
a
was
child,
making faces and ridiculing her music, which she didn't take to very kindly. And she said, you mustn't. But the funny thing is that it's had an effect on me, obviously subconsciously.
Yes, it does, yeah.
And nowadays I'm very fond of classical music, and I think it was her. She was always listening to classical music, which at the time I found detestable. But
and
then with time I learned to love it.
What would be your pick? You said you liked Beethoven?
All the great composers are geniuses. We just have to recognize that. Mozart's a genius, and Beethoven's another genius, and Wagner's another genius. Classical music genius. Yeah,
I agree.
I'm loath to pick one actually.
It's difficult.
Yeah.
I think also music reflects a mood, and sometimes you're in the mood for the dramatic, and sometimes you're in the mood for something a bit softer.
Yes, but you put yourself in it because the way you and I go and listen to it is that we buy a ticket to go to the opera, and very often we have to buy the ticket months before,
That's
2
right.
months before, 6 months before. So you don't know what mood you're
That's
going
right.
to be in.
Yeah.
But on the night, once you sit down and the lights go down, you go into another world. And I think this sort of escapism is part of the experience that we all enjoy. We leave our everyday world behind and we join this imaginary world,
So let's look a little bit at your early life.
I was born in Heliopolis, in our house. My mother insisted on giving birth to both my sister and I at home. And I was blessed by having a very close family life. I saw both my parents almost every day, pretty well every day. And there was a definite sort of love in
close
bond,
family unit.
Very strong. So this is a blessing. I mean, I know that a lot of people don't have that.
Absolutely, yes.
And I was just born into that. I thank God for it. And I think what I had privileged in my life is people. I was given these lovely parents and very nice sister I'm very close to until today. And then teachers and people were wonderful with me. I mean,
were you home tutored?
Yeah.
You were?
No, not entirely. No, I went to the Jesuit school, to les Jésuites.
Les Jésuites.
They were a very good school and very cosmopolitan in our time. Lots of friends were Christians, Muslims, Jews. Everything.
Lebanese, Syrian, the
Everything.
melting pot of Egypt.
It's very unusual. I mean, by the time I went to England, I realized how unusual it was.
And then you left Egypt in 1957, is that correct?
No, 53.
53, sorry. To France, is that correct?
To France, yeah. My father had been head of the Regency Council.
Yes.
There were 3 regions. But then the other 2, Hannah got into trouble and I believe was under arrest.
Yes.
And Barakat left. He found it going difficult.
Yes.
And father stayed to the bitter end, but I mean, he was then dropped and then Republic was declared. And then it was arranged that my sister and I would go with my uncle Muhammad Ali Ibrahim and his wife and their 2 children. We went to Paris, to live in Paris. I then didn't see my father my sister and I didn't see our father for 5 years, which was quite long.
That's a long time.
Because then, for a while, they were under house arrest.
And they remained in Egypt?
They remained in Egypt. My father had already been in exile once in his life, so he thought, now that I'm back, I don't want to go out again because last time I spent so much time abroad, and I might not survive that and might not come back at all. So but in the end, there was court case and so on. So they had a hard time and they eventually left as well.
And it must have been very difficult for you and your sister to be apart for 5 years from your father.
Yes.
Was your mother also away from you?
Mother managed to come out twice on holiday. So we saw mother twice on holiday during those 5 years.
Because that's a very young age for you.
It's a very young age. We were, again, blessed by our relatives who looked after us wonderfully. I mean, we were just second family. It was wonderful. They
Thank
really
God for
looked
them.
after
Absolutely.
us very, very well. So we weren't missing anything.
Yes.
Except, of course, our real parents were also in difficult circumstances, so that this was a worry.
Were you aware at that age of what was happening?
Yes.
You were
I think
conscious of it.
when you're 15 or something, you're fully aware of what's going on.
And were you anxious about it? Did you worry about it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So from there, you went on to the UK to study?
Yes. My parents wanted that, and I thought they were crazy because they sent a letter through a friend. Very few friends managed to go and visit them because they needed a permit and all sorts of things. And most people were terrified to go to do that. And but a very good friend went to see them and took a letter from them. And the mother and father was saying, go and university in England, either Oxford or Cambridge.
No other options.
Either Oxford or
Yes.
Cambridge. Yeah.
So you did all your secondary school.
My English was appalling. It was very bad. To be bad at English in France was just about the pits. It shows how bad it was.
Absolutely. And then having to make it to the UK.
It was my worst language subject at school. But anyway, I have very good friends from that school in Paris. So I gained from that in the sense that I retained very good friends from my school in Egypt, and then in Paris, and then in England.
Whenever I think of you, I always think of you as an Anglophile. I never think of you as a Francophile.
Oh no, I am. Yeah.
So you consider yourself a bit of both.
I'm a chameleon.
You're a chameleon, depending on where you are.
In France, I'm French, and I'm blessed with the fact that I have this gift. I can feel completely at home almost anywhere, I think. But these countries are countries I know very well. So if I go in the street, the moment I come back to Egypt, I feel, I'm home, But if I go to Paris, where I haven't lived all that much, apart from the school, I feel completely comfortable,
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you, because having lived in so many different places, where do you consider home? Fundamentally.
I know the original home is Egypt.
Egypt.
No doubt about it. Yeah.
And today, would it be more Istanbul because your immediate family are there?
Yeah, when you see, I suppose I'm part of something which no longer exists because we were brought up to think there was no difference between the two.
Yes,
virtually.
Absolutely, that's right.
So
we forget that today, don't we?
I don't really feel there's much difference. Although the two countries were odds until yesterday.
That's right.
But yesterday they've become friends again.
They've become friends again.
Such are politics in the Middle East, very complicated. But I'm a dinosaur.
So in a way, you look at it in a borderless way, a bit like the Ottoman Empire itself was.
Yeah, I think it should be borderless. I don't see why we have all these complications between us, but that's how it is.
And your identity, if you were to say to somebody, if someone was to ask you about your identity, what would that be for you?
I'm a Turco-Egyptian, there's a lot of us. And if you look at it, I think people don't. If you look at it the way Egypt is, there's enormous link. Forget the Republic of Turkey. The Republic of Turkey is new. It's a new country. 1923. It's yesterday. But the cultural link with Turks, goes back. Ahmed ibn Tulun in 950 or something broke away. He was the wali, the governor of Egypt, and he broke away from the Abbasiyin and governed Egypt. So when he struck his coins, which are at the Islamic Museum, he says, Duriba, minted, if you need it in English.
Yes.
Fil Imara, in the principality, at Turkiya, at Tuluniya. So Tulun is his name.
Tulun is his name, yes.
So the only name of the country is Turkey.
But he's meshed it all together.
So he said, Duriba fil Imara Turkiya Tuluniya. So he calls Egypt Turkey.
Yes.
Because he is Turkish. He is a Kapchak Turk, who was really basically the people who is now in Kazakhstan, and the tribes which are in Kazakhstan. Imagine he brought in Ahmed ibn Tulun, he himself brought in, immediately, he started straight away because he needed to start a new series here. So he brings in 10,000 Kapchaks boys, okay, first year.
Yes.
Next year, he brings another 10,000. This is 950. Muhammad Ali is 1,800. And in 1800, Muhammad Ali puts an end to the Mamluks. So look at it. From 900 to 1800, 900 years
of intermarrying in Egypt.
They bring
yes.
roughly 10,000 Turks every year.
And so, as you say, you can't separate them.
I think that most people you see walking in the street in
Absolutely.
Cairo have Turkish blood.
Absolutely. It's just by a simple calculation.
Absolutely. But then they married locally and stayed locally.
Yes.
So that's maybe some of the difference.
Yes. We'll continue our conversation with Prince Abbas Hilmi right after this short break. Welcome back. I'm Malak Fuad, and you're listening to What I Did Next from ANT Media. And our conversation today is with Prince Abbas Hilmi. In the 1960s, the prince went to Oxford, where he studied politics, philosophy, and economics, or PPE, and found himself interested in economics in particular. He then began working in finance in the City of London.
It's without taking all the ins and outs, but eventually Muhammad Yunus, who I had met when I was little, we knew each other from school. He's slightly older than me, and Muhammad created his own firm called Concord, where you are now, and I was the first person to join him. And so we had a hard time, to tell the truth, to start with. But then we eventually got the mandate to run the mutual funds of Banque Misr in Egypt. We were always trying to manage their dollars in the United States. But then they said, well, what about here? So we took it. And then we hired a man to be the manager, and to manage the funds and so on. And then that man let us down very badly 2 weeks before launch. And he said, no, I'm afraid I can't come, and so on. What he didn't tell us is that he hadn't really told his employer that he was leaving.
I see.
So Muhammad said, well, there's nothing we can do. The thing is going to go, and we've signed the contract to run it. And so you must do it. You must do it. You stay and you run it until we can find somebody else. And of course, I'm still here.
And you're still here. Was the move to Egypt purely for the new position, or was there something else at play? Was there a desire to come back?
Yes. No, I agree. I think there was both. I had a great desire to come back. I've always wanted to come back. And I couldn't find a way to come back properly. So I suppose it fitted in with that.
With that plan or that desire?
This was probably the biggest challenge professionally that I've ever had, because, had somebody in London been kind enough to offer me the job, similar to what Muhammad had offered me, they would have said, oh, hello, Hilmi, how are you? Here's your office, and here's your assistant, and here's your equipment, and get on with it.
Off you go.
You see? Except that here, we didn't have an office. We didn't have an assistant.
You built it all from scratch.
Yeah, absolutely. And all these things which I assumed, I never thought about. How do you choose a telephone,
Yeah.
Telephone system. Because
absolutely.
It's an office, lots of people.
Of course. And you're not thinking for the short term, you're thinking for,
Yes. I mean, I'll buy this, it's quite expensive.
Yeah.
So once you bought it, you're stuck with it.
Yeah.
So I had to do all that. And it's very gratifying, really. Because in the end, I thought, we built it from scratch.
It's very, yes.
From nothing.
Yeah.
And Muhammad was mostly in New York, coming and going. he's a wonderful sort of ideas man, and he sees very clearly everything. But I had to deal with the everyday problems, and it wasn't easy, but in the end, it was a wonderful feeling of having built something.
How was it on a personal level being back and reintegrating within the family structure of who was left here, or the friends and the childhood friends?
No, that's a very nice part. And in fact, I had braced myself that I thought after all the years and years of propaganda against us, saying what monsters we were, I said, one or two people are going to say things which are going to be unpleasant. And I must say, until today, nobody has ever said anything unpleasant, which I think says a lot for Egyptians, because I'm sure some of them maybe didn't approve of us, but they weren't unpleasant about it. And Egyptians are very friendly people, very, very nice people.
And while you were in the UK and in France as a younger man, and you'd heard all of this sort of propaganda that you just mentioned that was coming out of the Middle East and out of Egypt, how was that for you? How did that feel for you? Did you feel threatened?
When I was in abroad, it's frustrating because there's nothing you can do about it. Once you're here, then of course your presence, it means, I don't think I look like a monster, and I'm not a monster. And I think once you're here, it's no longer quite so frustrating.
Is there a balancing act that you have to adhere to when you're in Egypt now, or when you came back, that you felt that there were certain parameters you had to live within?
Well, I think that most of us who are westernized Orientals are doing this balancing act, and I'm sure you're very familiar with it. And I think it's very tricky. And I always think that people who marry foreigners, it's very difficult for the foreigner, because the foreigner doesn't quite get the balance right, and it's easier, I always thought. I saw several ladies mostly who married Saudis in Saudi Arabia, and they fit in completely because they adopt a completely different way of life, and that's it. If they accept it,
they took it on board.
That's it.
Yeah.
But here, and in all our part of the world, it's much more complicated. It looks as if we're very westernized, but actually we have some hang-ups about this.
So we have more gray zones.
And you're never quite sure, if you're a foreigner, where the line is drawn.
Yes.
It's tricky, but it comes naturally to us.
Of course, you're able to sort of put on a different coat, if you like.
Yes.
And then take it off if you need to.
That's what I meant. We're a bit. Yeah, we're a bit chameleon-like, which we keep changing.
And what about being part of the royal family in Egypt? How is that for you? Did you find that you had to adhere to certain parameters in that way regarding any kind of public life that you might have here?
I have no public life, so that makes it easy.
And was that a conscious choice, or?
Yeah. I've never been keen on that.
You never were?
No. Nor by being keen on politics.
So you now divide your time between Egypt and Turkey, is that correct?
Correct.
So Istanbul is more now of the base.
Yes.
And in Turkey, there were stories a few years ago that Erdogan is quite interested in the Ottoman heritage and the Ottoman history, and is putting a lot of energy behind that. How is that? Have you experienced that when you're there?
That goes on, and I can't really make it out. I mean, I don't pretend to really understand what's going on, because I mean, there's a lot. Some of it I'm very pleased about, because of course it's our heritage. But and it was put down and not allowed in Turkey which was wrong. I mean,
it was for a very long time. Yes.
I mean,
yes.
Especially when you have such a rich heritage.
Yes.
To not use it
and to deny it
and to deny it or not use it really.
Yes.
So pretend it didn't happen. Silly. I mean, it's just stupid and an awful shame. But now it's gone back with a vengeance, and he has taken over the Hagia Sophia mosque, Hagia Sophia, and make it back into a mosque, which I don't approve of, but they have restored a lot of mosques, which I'm very happy about, and they look wonderful, a lot of them. For example, he changed the constitution, and he's a executive president, whereas the president before that was just a figurehead. He's like a president, more or less, of France, something like that, Not far from it.
Right.
He has a lot of power and influence, and so it was a new function. So they were going to have the swearing-in ceremony, So before that, it wasn't important. So they went and asked him and said, well, "What swearing-in ceremony do we do?" So he said, "Oh, do like the last Sultan."
Really?
The last Sultan is Vahdettin. Vahdettin is my mother's grandfather.
Yes.
So, and I watched it on television. I couldn't believe it. They said they do zikr and prayers and so on. It's very Islamic.
Yes.
But all the prayers was for Vahdettin. Actually, Vahdettin.
Really?
And they didn't mention him at all.
They didn't change the wording?
They didn't.
How strange.
I can't make it out.
That's very strange.
Does he not want it? Maybe he doesn't want his name mentioned like that.
Yes.
But to actually say the prayers for Vahdettin, which of course is my great-grandfather, so
you were very happy to hear it.
Very, very surprised and pleasantly surprised to hear it, but I can't understand it.
Yeah.
And then another relative came, and I said, "I'm sure you want to go to Friday prayers," and he said yes. So his hotel is a Swiss hotel. Behind it is the Hamidiyya Mosque Sultan Abdul Hamid had built, and again it had fallen into disrepair, and they restored it very well. And on Friday, Friday prayers, etc. So I took this relative, who's my Jordanian relative, is also related to the Ottoman family. So I took him there, and then we all said the Friday prayers, and then the dua came, and in the dua they went on and on about Sultan Abdul Hamid, and not a word about the present people.
Very strange.
Nothing.
So they're glorifying that era.
Yes.
Very interesting.
And but they don't make the link.
They don't make the connection.
Well, most Turks don't understand what they're talking about anyway. Because they don't know Arabic.
Absolutely.
And it's all in Arabic.
Of course. So tell me a little bit about the work you're doing now in terms of restoration in Egypt and the association.
Well, I don't do anything, but I'm trying to be involved in heritage preservation. I think that's what it is. So I've picked on Manuel because it was done by my great uncle Prince Muhammad Ali Tawfiq. And I thought it's a duty for me, really, I think, to try and save something from what he did. All his life he was a great collector, and he had a wonderful collection, and he made all these buildings, and he saved the gardens, which again are in danger now of extinction, really, because they're not looking after it properly. And these gardens are very old. Some of the trees are 400 or 500 years old. So it's Mamluk. It's a Mamluk garden.
It's quite impressive as a
very
space.
Very old garden. And he added to it. He brought in plants and so on. He was very keen on that and very knowledgeable about it. And he wrote about it. And he brought in plants from the Far East and he brought in plants from Mexico, and he loved traveling. So we're trying to save that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's been an ongoing project for quite a number of years now, hasn't it?
Yes, and again, I'm blessed with having wonderful friends and so on who are very keen as well, and so we're all together. So it's made a nice group, and it's a nice feeling of togetherness.
Of course.
Yeah.
And do you find that for yourself on a sort of a personal level that it's a way for you to give back a little bit to Egypt,
Yes,
by preserving your own personal heritage as well?
Egypt is so rich, I mean, it goes back thousands of years, as you know. So it's a bit daunting to preserve heritage in Egypt, I must say. I mean, where do you start? There's so much. So I think where do you start is with the thing that's obvious to you, the thing that's in front of you. And Manial is in front of us, it's on the island of Rhoda, it's in the middle of Cairo. So, and when we started off, there was a hotel there, as you probably remember.
The Club Med, right?
Club Med,
yes.
with shacks. It wasn't me. I mean, I had nothing to do with it. I think Farouk Gouda is an Egyptian poet, as you probably know, and he writes in the Ahram and so on. And he mounted a campaign to save Manial.
When was this?
I admire this.
Was this in the early 90s? What sort of period?
Yeah, it was the 90s.
Early 90s.
Yeah. Mid-90s.
And I believe you also renovated and restored some family mausoleums as well, didn't you?
Yes. This is where Prince Muhammad Ali, for example, is buried. Is the mausoleum of Khedive Tawfiq, and they call it Ubbat Afendina, but this is the popular name for it. And I think it's a very fine building because it's an Art Nouveau Mamluk style.
Interesting.
Which
very
is
interesting
very
combination.
much in fashion in 1900. And Antonio Lasiac, who was the court architect, I think he built a lovely thing.
And are there any other projects you're working on at the moment? Conservation projects?
Not really, no. I think that these two give me enough time, a lot of...
And they're ongoing, are they? They're continuing?
Well, our main thing now is that we are trying to reopen the museum, the actual museum at Manial. Manial, what you see now in the buildings, but the museum itself is closed and all the artifacts are kept in storage. So we're friends of a museum which is closed.
Yes. And what is the status on that? When is it likely to open? Or
well, we as an association are hoping to kickstart it. So we'll do a little bit and hope that it will encourage others to come and help us finish it.
Well, thank you very, very much for your time. That was very, very interesting.
Pleasure.
I'm delighted that you were with us.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in today. This episode was brought to you by A&T Media with me, Malak Fuad, and is co-produced by Chirag Desai. I hope you've enjoyed hearing from our eclectic mix of guests this season. My aim was to bring you a mix of stories, people and places, and most importantly, some inspiring life journeys. I felt that each person's story resonated with me in some way, and to hear more about that, stay tuned for our wrap-up episode in 2 weeks' time, where I look back on the highlights of the season and look ahead to what's coming up in Season 3. As always, please remember to follow us on social media for updates on the show, and I'd really appreciate it if you could leave us a review in your podcast player. I hope you can join us in 2 weeks' time.